this thing too. If you're gonna be around police officers, canine handlers, and you're gonna offer a product or a service, make sure it's worthwhile. Make sure it's something that applies to them. Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'll tell you this much. I'll give you this example. If you're a police dog handler that is constantly worried about your dog's grip, its gripping as full as possible, and you're putting 4 hours of training a week into your dog's grip, you've bought the wrong dog.
Right.
Bite work is probably it is an important aspect of it, but I see people on social media all the time. They're professing to be police dog trainers. And how important is it for your dog to grip full?
Right.
There's some importance to it. But to a real canine handler who's out in the field as a police officer, doing all the things that he's required to do, this is probably going to be the least of your concerns. If this is your major concern, you've bought the wrong dog.
Right.
But so many police dog guys or people that are trying to cross over into the industry put so much emphasis on this and not all the other aspects that go into the dog.
Right.
But that's a sign of a novice. Mm-hmm. And I see it all the time. I see it on social media quite a bit.
Right.
You know, I'm gonna make the dog bark at a prone suspect, and now I'm gonna reward him with this tug. Well, it looks important to the novice canine handler, and it may have some worth to him. You may make him feel better, but to the experienced eye, there's not much worth there. We're not gonna dedicate 5 hours a week to that. There's too many other things as an officer, as a peace officer, that I gotta do.
This that go and get it, with no hesitation. This that never quit, start that elevation. This that process, this that in the making.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Elevated Canine Podcast. And today I have a legend in the game. He's gonna be kind of humble, but anybody that you talk to out, especially out here in our area, they know this man, Romeo. And so, Romeo, thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, the reason why I called Romeo a couple of weeks ago was because I want to get more involved in the police side of things when it comes to dog training, and Danny was like, Romeo's your guy, and obviously I've known you for years now, but we never really got into talking, and I didn't really know the extent of, you know, how much you were involved in all that, man, especially like the, you know, all the tactical side. But before anything, man, why don't you just tell us who you are and kind of how it got started, you know? Yeah,
my name's Romeo Ingreso. I was a deputy sheriff in LA County for over 30 years. 10 years as a canine handler, 3 years as a canine sergeant, worked a bunch of other assignments, patrol down in South LA. But overall, 30 years with the LA County Sheriff's Department. I was assigned to a unit as a canine handler called SEB. Mm-hmm. So for those who don't know, it's basically the tactical wing of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. It's comprised of three main details. Emergency services details are tactical paramedics. They conduct swiftwater rescues, support SWAT operators on SWAT activations, support canine handlers on high-risk area searches and other SWAT operations. Then we have the SED, that's comprised of 6 full-time SWAT teams. So 10 men each, all full-time SWAT operators. It's not a collateral duty. Those men are there full-time operating as dedicated SWAT operators. And then we have the canine detail, and that's what I was a member of, where we have 12 full-time canine handlers that work single-purpose dogs.
Apprehension?
Yes, the dogs are meant to locate and detain suspects during operations that support patrol, operations that support the SWAT side, or SWAT activations like a barricaded suspect.
Got it.
Things of that nature. Certain hostage rescue applications, but 12 full-time dogs there. They're not dual purpose, just single purpose, and those handlers aren't working in a patrol capacity.
Right.
They're dedicated only to handling a dog and supporting other assets on the department.
Got it. But let's go back some more, because I know obviously that's like, your bread and butter, but you initially got into were you already a deputy when you got into Schutzen, or was that,
yeah,
what was it before?
I was a deputy sheriff. I joined the department in the late 80s. Really got exposed to the dog sport, and mainly Schutzen. I would say mid to late 90s. And I don't want to lead anyone on any, false routes here. I mean, I never competed with a dog. I never campaigned a dog, but the majority of my time in the Schützen community was spent decoying.
Right, doing helper work.
Helper work, and as a training helper. I did some trials, did a bunch of local trials. I did the 2001 North American Championships in Palmdale as the back half helper, and then I want to say it was the 2002 National Championships in Gadsden, Alabama as the back half helper.
Nice.
So I was already a deputy sheriff, but when I found the dog sport and decoying, it was something that just, it was like an addiction. I was very drawn to it. I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Nice. So then, like how many years in did you get into K9?
So I had been doing helper work for probably 3, maybe 4 years. I had started the application process to become a canine handler. So that's a long process. Typically you have to apply 2 to maybe 4 times. It takes about anywhere between 5 to 7 years to get accepted into that unit.
Especially in like LA sheriffs, right? Like that's a big...
Yeah, they're highly selective, and they have to be. They're looking for a certain type of individual with certain characteristics, traits, I would say a certain maturity level as a police officer and as a person. So I had been doing decoy work in the Schützen community, I would say maybe 3 to 4 years. And then I got hired at SEB, or I was assigned to SEB and became a full-time canine handler there.
Got it. Yep. Nice. So what do you think, what's the biggest difference from like going, because that's when I contacted you, I'm like, hey man, like I come from like the sports side, and I feel like I can add something, but I don't want to approach this like the wrong way. And I know that, like talking to Dan, our friend Danny, we're both friends with Danny, he's always talking about dirtying up dogs and everything. Obviously the level of control that we require in sport is something that is not really needed, right, for you guys. Yeah,
I would say the biggest eye-opener for me going from the sport community to the police dog community was as a dog sport helper, I always assumed that canine handlers lack control, that they weren't good dog trainers, that those of us in the dog sport community had so much more to offer them in terms of training. It was a big eye-opener for me once I started to handle a police dog professionally. When I found out that the majority of the stuff that I was exposed to in the dog sport community was not applicable to the police dog community. Do we have some parallels and some crossovers? We do. Can the dog sport community benefit the police dog community? It can. But there are a lot of misnomers, a lot of false beliefs about the police dog community that a lot of dog sport people have.
What are some of them?
Well, I will tell you the first one, and I was no different. Police dog handlers lack control of their dogs. And I'll give you a perfect example. So you go out to a Schützen field, PSA field, and you watch a dog heel, off leash, on leash, it doesn't matter. It's very attentive. It's looking up at its handler 99.9% of the time. And why is that? We've trained and molded the dog to do that for the purpose of gaining points. We want to trial the dog, campaign the dog, title the dog, compete with the dog, and be successful in all those venues. So I thought, why don't police dogs do that? And I'll tell you exactly why. When I used to get out of the car with my police dog, the first thing I did before he ever left the car was put a leash on him. When he got out of the car, I didn't want him looking up at me. I didn't want him staring into my eyes. I wanted him looking around, using every physical capacity he could to find the person I was tasked with finding. So his ears, his eyes, and his nose. If the dog was looking up at me attentively, he wasn't making use of all those advantages that they could give us. I never had my dog heel. The only time my dog was off leash was when he was searching. There was no reason to have that dog off leash unless I was directing him or allowing him to go search. So a lot of dog sport people see this and they think, oh, they don't have the capacity to train that. It's not that they lack the capacity, there's not a need for it.
Right.
There really isn't. So it's things like that. Those are some of the misnomers. And then the other ones are that, most police dogs are not social. They're the rejects of the dog sport world that come across from brokers in Europe.
Right.
And then we get the secondhand dogs as police officers. And I just found that to be untrue. I had a friend that actually worked, I want to say it was the KMPV1 champion in 1996. That was not a reject from the dog sport world. And that dog
Ended up going on the street.
Was on the streets and was very much a street dog. So I think a lot of times, and then the other thing is, the majority of the time when we procure a police dog, we're looking for a different type of animal than, let's say, a top dog sport competitor. The interests are different. When I'm procuring, or when I was procuring police dogs, I was looking for an animal that was going to give the men and I that I were working with every advantage to come out of that situation safely. And not only us, but the public and the suspect as well.
Right.
So that was the animal I was looking for. As a dog sport competitor, if you're looking at an adolescent or juvenile to adolescent dog that, maybe is too much for someone else, you're looking for, how can I campaign this dog?
Right.
Right? And then maybe to breed it later. Two very different things.
Right.
Very, very different things. So if that kind of makes sense to you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I have a question for you, like especially like right now, like all eyes on us and everything, and people think that police officers are just out there to hunt and all the time. But you mentioned something earlier, like no, that was not the job of the K9, right?
Right.
What was it?
So I'll tell you the role and the purpose of a single-purpose canine who's trained to locate and detain suspects is not biting. That is really a small byproduct of the work. The role of that dog is to locate a suspect and provide a greater degree of safety for the public, for the law enforcement personnel that are tasked with finding this suspect, and for the suspect himself. I will tell you that the police dog, properly trained, properly handled, and professionally handled, probably saves the lives of more suspects than any other law enforcement tool.
Right.
Many of these people that law enforcement is tasked with searching for, right now we're in this park setting, but all around us are single family homes. If you can imagine a murder suspect hiding in one of these homes or in one of these backyards, that's a danger to the public. That's a grave threat. And law enforcement is going to be tasked with finding this person and safely taking that person into custody. It's not the goal of the handler to bite that suspect. It's the goal of the handler to utilize that dog to find him in the most safest, efficient manner possible. So I think a lot of dog sport people, and really the public in general, think that the only role of the police dog is to bite people. That is a very small byproduct of the work that a police canine handler does. Right. And I'm talking from the aspect of a police canine handler in the greater LA community. That is a very, very, I just cannot emphasize this enough.
Yeah, because I mean,
a small byproduct of the work we do.
Because I know I was thinking like, I mean, you're part of LA, and just when you told me what parts you were patrolling, like, there's got to be a lot of bites there.
There are. There are and there aren't. Do the dogs bite people? They do. But in relationship to the number of deployments and operations that we're involved in, there are not a lot of bites. And I will tell you that if you go talk to these people who have been confronted with a police dog, been bitten by a police dog, many of them will tell you, I'm glad the dog bit me because I was going to shoot it out and I'd probably be dead. Yep. And that's the last thing people want to do. Canine handlers, SWAT operators, that's a mature community, very professional. It's not our goal to shoot people. It's not our goal to bite and harm people.
Right.
It's our goal to safeguard the public, ourselves, and even the suspect.
Yeah.
I just cannot get that out enough.
Yep. Yeah, man, that's a great point, and I think that more people need to be aware of that. Like,
Yeah.
it's not about, you know, locating and biting. It's about locating and making everybody else around safe to
Yes.
make sure that, you know, something worse doesn't happen.
That's the role of the police dog.
Yeah, man. I right now that we're talking about this, I know you remember that shootout with that guy in Compton back in the 90s. With it was like in the front yard or backyard where they sent the K9 in, and then they started shooting, and the guy was at the door. It's like a.
I can't remember that one.
So it was in Compton. You remember, Roel? They sent this dog in to get this dog he's like in the backyard or the front yard or the front of the house, and then when they let him go, this guy looks like he drops something or he takes something out, and then boom, 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 and they shoot the K9.
Oh,
you know what I'm talking about?
I do know. So I worked alongside that dog, and the handler.
I had a feeling. That's why.
I worked alongside that dog for years. So, PH1 dog, mixed breed Malinois. We suspect he was half Rottweiler, half Malinois.
Really?
Dog's name was Marco. Probably one of the most phenomenally gifted animals I've ever worked alongside. Not a dog for dog sport, but gifted as a police dog. You had to have a certain toughness about you to handle that type of animal. But I do remember that. Very unfortunate.
Yeah.
The dog died, the suspect died. But you know, that was an operation that we learned a lot from.
Right.
There was some self-examination that occurred. I'm still very good friends with the handler that handled the dog that day.
Man.
We talk on a weekly basis.
Really?
Yes.
I'll never forget that video. Watching it, this was before I even got into dogs. I watched this.
I do know what you're talking about. He was on a back porch.
Yep, that one.
He was kneeling down.
Yeah.
That was.
I mean, obviously things are going to happen where mistakes happen, and you
Yeah.
know, and I think that for sure that was probably a big learning curve for a lot of police canine all over the world, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean,
over the US.
one of the things, you know, with the advent of technology, body cams, video cameras, handheld cell phones is, you know, these events are captured on video, and there's no escaping what you capture on video.
Right.
The only thing you can do is learn from it.
Right.
And I think for all of us in the unit at that time, that was a massive learning experience.
Yeah.
Massive.
All right. I remember this. So anyway,
I knew the dog well.
yeah, man. That was a crazy video.
Phenomenal Malinois.
Yeah. So another thing too, I think you know, that people don't take into consideration is like, especially when it comes to dogs, or, you know, like it's real world. Like you're not playing a sport. So
Right.
you know, with me, if my dog gets dirty, I lose some points. That's it.
Right.
With you guys, I mean, you're out there. Your life is on the line. And not just that, but people think that, and you could tell me if I'm wrong, I have my own assumption, but once a dog gets a couple street bites and he feels, you know, it's not like you could just control him like he's in a sport field now, right? Like there's an animal instinct that turns on after this dog has some bites, right?
So I've heard this discussed 1,000 times. I will tell you that once a dog is comfortable biting a human being, I don't think it makes him any more dangerous to anyone else. It doesn't convert him into some wild animal that we can't control. Now he's just acclimated to biting. If you take a 10-week-old Malinois puppy who's never seen a leather rag, and maybe the first few times he's not really interested in it, but then he learns that he can derive some pleasure and self-satisfaction from biting that rag. Now that puppy, who's at 12 weeks, wants to bite the rag energetically. And you could swing him around and put a cool video on YouTube or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And not to equate a human suspect with a rag, because there's obviously far greater a difference. But I think once the dog is acclimated to those circumstances and those behaviors, he's much more apt to do it. And remember, we're asking the dog to perform these behaviors without any aid or support of the handler.
Right.
So I'll give you an example. We're looking at these homes at 2 a.m. in the dark. A guy's hiding with a Tech 9 or an AK-47. I don't want to be there to have to tell the dog to bite this guy should he need to.
Right.
That has to be a response that's trained into the dog through repetition, acclimation. So that's what we need from our dog.
Right.
And then the control aspect that we need is, let's say we start to go in that backyard and a homeowner steps out. I need that dog to recall on a dime. That when I say come here, he comes back to me. Does he got to come back and go to the perfect heel position and look up into my eyes? No, and that's not what I want. But the dog has to come back to me. But the idea that the dog turns into some different type of animal once he gets street bites.
So you're saying you just basically opened the door that now he knows, hey, this is the door that can be
And
opened.
I'll give you a perfect example. A dog that I trained, not social, outside of the work. He was neutral to the work. We could all touch him, lift him over walls, lift him into an attic, crawl into
In the work.
In the work, while we're working with a SWAT team, you name it. He would not bite us because he would tolerate it because he thought there was some enjoyment for him. He was going to get to go search. And that's what that dog loved to do. But outside of a working environment, in a social setting like this,
He was an asshole.
if you went up to interact with him and you started petting him on the head, he would probably bite you. And he was a rank dog as well. So if he was here enjoying himself on this bench and you came and encroached his space and asked him to leave, he would challenge you.
I think, we
But-
don't talk about that too much anymore.
Those things occur. But that dog didn't change once he started getting
Right.
real apprehensions. And I trained a IPO2 dog that came from I now say I'm IPO, I'm sorry, Schutzen 2, whatever we call it now. A Schutzen 2 dog that came from a kennel, I want to say in Sweden, that was known for producing sport dogs, handler soft dogs. And everyone told me that the dog would never bite. He had too much prey, not enough defense, all these other behaviors that dog trainers love to talk for hours about that really don't mean much at the end of the day.
Interesting, yeah.
And this dog went on to have like 45 street bites. He was very social outside the work. The moment he started getting street bites, he didn't become unsocial. You could let him run around people in the office. He wouldn't bite you irresponsibly.
Right.
He was still the same dog, but now he knew at 2 a.m. the guy hiding under a car was most likely the person I've asked him to search for, and he would engage him.
Got it. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. No, and
he was still the same exact
right.
dog.
And I'm glad you spoke on that because a lot of people have this misconception of how these dogs change or something like that.
It's a rarity.
But what I wanted to talk a little bit about was just how the control does change a little bit, right? When it comes to once the dog is like on a real bite and how this suspect reacts and all that.
Yeah.
Are you going to be able to out this dog exactly how you were doing it in training, or are you going to move down some notches?
So,
like how did you approach your training to assure that you had a successful deployment and maybe a recall if you needed it?
Right. So let's examine, and let's just say the out. The out in the sport world, irregardless of sport, IPO, PSA,
French ring.
French ring, Mondio, Belgian, there are all rules and a judge out there that are governing what the decoy does.
Right.
Right? So the decoy is expected to behave in a certain way as the dog prepares to out. If I was an IGP helper and right before the out, let's say at a national championship, I rose a stick and flinched into the dog, what would that cause?
Right.
It would cause an uproar. Hey, the helper, he did my dog wrong, and that's why he didn't out or go into this transition. I don't know what you guys call it now, Oscar. I'm so far removed from it. But so when you examine that, everything is built around the success of the dog. Even though the helper is there to oppose him, the helper is acting under the guise of a judge.
Yeah.
And really there's some etiquette there. When a police dog is asked to out, it is typically in a very violent situation, and most of the time not violent from the dog. It's mostly from the suspect who is trying to either fight the dog, escape the dog. You got to remember, a guy that's looking at going to prison the rest of his life isn't going to act like your IPO helper on a trial field.
Right. He's not going to lock up.
Exactly. And then, you have the handler and the support personnel that are tasked with taking this guy into custody, there's a concern for their own safety. So outing a police dog and outing a sport dog are two entirely different things. Can you out a police dog and make him return to you from a real person? 500% you can.
Yeah.
Does that always work that way or happen that way? No, but it's because of the circumstances and all the other factors that come into play.
Right.
There's a
Everything
lot
changes.
more to it. No one is going to tell you whether your dog was slow to out on a suspect.
Right.
But if you're quick to go up and try and gain control of the dog, or if you out the dog prematurely and now this guy pulls out a gun and starts to shoot, what have we accomplished?
Right.
Our whole goal is to keep everyone, including the suspect, safe.
Right. Yeah, it's a tough job, man. I mean, just thinking about you making decisions while you're under all that pressure, you have to train. I mean, you have to.
Yeah.
It's like it has to be like almost like muscle memory sometimes, right? Like a lot of these things.
Yeah,
but
I mean, you train for it, you go to schools, you talk about it, you learn from prior experiences, but you're expected to make life-changing decisions on the fly at a moment's notice.
Right.
And that's what we expect you to do. That's what I expected
That's
of
tough.
myself. That's what I expected of the men that worked around me. And there was a certain trust factor there because these guys, we worked in small teams.
Right.
And I trusted these guys that were with me, and I trusted their dogs.
Man.
But that's the difference between the sport out, and that's the other thing you'll see sport people or even other police dog people who are, let's say, coming from units that aren't very active, who aren't getting a lot of real contacts with humans. They'll see a dog that's not outing right away, or a dog biting a suspect and the team walk up to take control of the suspect versus out the dog and bring the dog back. And you get a lot of these, well, they couldn't out the dog. Well, it's not that they couldn't, it just wasn't the most advantageous thing to do at that moment.
Right.
A lot of people don't realize that.
Right. No, that's good. That's good information, man.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. So for me, trying to get into this this world of police dogs and everything, I feel like, again, like my style of obedience is not, how can I say, it doesn't really correlate with what you guys were doing. However, I do feel like what we do outside of the sport field, meaning like just playing with your dog and doing things like, like even like your dog outing a toy while you have him and respecting that toy. Does he respect what I'm saying? Like, does he, like I do a lot of that stuff with my sports stuff. And so for me, I was of the idea of like, man, if I can create a couple games that these handlers could probably do outside of work, like on their downtime, maybe it could help them.
Yeah.
Is that like, and I want you could be completely honest with me. Is that something that you feel that can help, or you're like, you know what, this is why it doesn't really?
So I will tell you, I'll tell you the extent of my obedience when I was handling a police dog. I needed the dog to sit down for me, to lay down for me,
Yep.
come back to me, down at a distance, which means if he's out running around in this park searching at night and I
Nice,
tell
yep.
him to lay down, he has to lay down. And to be able to direct him. Hey, I want you to go left, I want you to go right. Beyond that, there wasn't a lot of obedience.
Right.
I'll just tell you right now. Because
What about impulse control? Like, is that something that you worked on or not really?
So it was, but the majority of my work as a police K9 handler and trainer, there weren't all these different methods.
Right.
I went through a very basic police dog class. It was, I think, 6 weeks total, 1 week of academics and preparation, 5 weeks of just getting bit and handling your dog, and make sure that when you left that academy, you and your dog were comfortable with one another.
Right.
There were not a lot of fancy training techniques. There was no rewarding the dog with a ball or a toy or food.
Right.
It was, you're gonna heal and you're gonna do it right now. Now, there's some time consequence to that. We only had 4 to 5 weeks, right?
Right.
And now I've got this Metloff pointed Malinois that is handler hard that I gotta get acclimated to me in 5 weeks. So there was a little bit of time consequence to that. It was time sensitive. But as far as teaching the dog all these other things that I see now on social media.
You're talking about like what people teaching police dogs? Or,
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll give you a perfect example. I see this all the time. The dog is gonna heel between my legs while I have a rifle
No,
out.
that's not real, bro.
So I will tell you, if you're in a house with an adversary who's got a gun,
Yeah.
and you're doing that with your dog, you've watched too many social media
yeah.
clips, because that is not the real world.
Right.
I do think, like, people that come from your industry, you have things to offer, like how to teach those behaviors as quick as possible without causing animosity in the dog or some
conflict.
Yeah, less conflict between the handler and the dog. I think they can do that. And then, you know, when I became a handler, every once in a while I would hook up with a few of my sport buddies. So if we had a dog that was slow to out in training, I found that sport dog helpers and trainers were much more apt to teach that behavior than your police dog trainer.
Right.
So I do think that there's things that can cross over, and it's like I told you though, Oscar, I think for someone like in your industry, you're a very excellent, savvy dog trainer, to be able to cross over into the world of police dogs, the most important thing that I can tell you from my own personal experience and my beliefs are, you have to have the character, the principles, and the morals that align with law enforcement.
Right.
You could be the greatest dog trainer in the world, but if you're on video at some protest that encourages the killing or hurting of cops, no one is going to train with you.
Right.
500%, I will tell you that right away. We don't care how good you are.
Yep.
It's not going to happen.
Yep.
And I think that's really important for people to realize that are trying to cross over into that industry, because the industry's really expanded. When I got into it, there was not a bridge between the dog sport world and the police canine world. That bridge has been established now.
Yeah.
There's a friend of mine in New Mexico named Kevin Sheldall. I don't know if you're aware of who he is. He's probably, to me, one of the best police dog trainers in the country. He doesn't get a lot of notoriety. He doesn't self-promote. He's not on social media showing you all of his cool videos. But he came from the Schutzen world first. Became a canine handler as a law enforcement peace officer. And then when his law enforcement career was over, went on and opened up a police dog academy in New Mexico. He is someone that did it right.
Right.
But the one thing I can tell you about Kevin is all of his character and his ideals align with law enforcement.
Yeah. And I think he deserves a mention, as well as somebody who we were talking about before this, Dave Reaver, right?
Yeah, I mean,
he's one of our, I know here locally, he's like...
yeah, Dave Reaver is without a doubt, like I went to Adler Horse with my first dog. I procured police dogs for 10 years from Dave's company, Adler Horse International. I have an immense amount of respect for Dave and that company. On a side note, Dave is probably one of the toughest men
I've seen him, even right now with the shuts and sleeves, with just working dogs.
But you know, the thing that makes Dave and that company great is the way they support law enforcement. And they're very honest in their dealings with us. And that goes a long way in that industry.
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
your word is everything. So I would say, you know, for anyone looking to cross over into the industry, that is probably the first thing you got to reconcile and square away.
Right.
Everything after that should come easy if you're a good dog trainer.
Yeah, man. I love it. I love it. Yeah, so you did mention how, you know, there was a dog that, you know, he was not good for the sport dog world, but he was good for the police world.
Right.
What are the things that you look for or that separate a police dog and a sport dog?
So for me, one of the things I look for in a dog that is going to be a single purpose dog that's trained to search for suspects is their independence and their willingness to search. Some people will call it hunt. I say the word search for something completely independent of me. It means, and I'll give you an example. So one of the first things I used to do during procurement, when I would go, you know, it's dog day out at Adler Horse or whatever kennel your vendor you're going through. There's 40 new dogs that just came from Europe a week ago, all from different sporting dog backgrounds. Most people get the dog out and they want to go do bite work. I want to see how the dog bites. Well, the dog is going to look good because it enjoys biting most of the time. And then they'll do other things. But one of the first things that I like to do was just walk the dog around and look at him in his natural environment.
Right. Out to drive almost.
Right, out to drive. Let's just go for a walk. Is he constantly looking back at me for reassurance? if I change directions and he gets a little snap on the neck from his lead, how does he react to that?
Right.
Is his tail shut down? You know, those are the things that I look for in a dog.
That's super important. Yeah.
I wanted an outgoing dog who really was oblivious to me. He didn't care about what I was doing. He didn't look for me for guidance. He didn't come up to me for reassurance, to pet him on the head. I wanted a dog that was at the end of the leash looking for something to go in.
Independent.
Yeah, I wanted independence, because in a police dog, you need independence.
Right.
5,000,000%. I don't care who tells you otherwise. That is one of the most important aspects to having a successful police dog. But a sport dog handler, and I've seen this, they're looking at an adolescent dog, a 13, 14-month-old dog. He's really aloof, really doesn't pay me much attention. There's not much of a bond going on.
Right.
And then they tend to discount that animal.
Right.
That to me was almost a plus. I didn't look for that. And then the other thing was, you know, I'll tell you, I'll get into certain dog sports. I think that the KNPV, hands down, produces the best police dog for use here in North America. That program in itself, I think, creates a certain air of toughness in the dog. It promotes independence. It requires a dog to use their nose in a way that is completely independent of the handler to a degree.
Right.
I mean, a lot of it is a forced fetch, retrieve, whatever you want to call it. But I do think that the KNPV trained dog, the Malinois, Dutch Shepherd, to me those are one and the same animals. There's no difference. They are the same dog. Is going to give you
The better program for that.
It is. Yeah, it is. Now, I bought a couple of dogs from the Schützen program. I bought a German Shepherd for one of the handlers. Phenomenal dog. Phenomenal dog. One of the best police dogs I've ever been around. But there was a price to come. He was a tough German Shepherd. Some people would call him old-fashioned. He was a very handler hard and could be very delicate to deal with type dog. But those are the types of dogs that we were looking for.
Right. Yeah, it's completely different than the sport. The sport, you kind of wanted one that's like a little bit, I mean, depending on the person.
Yeah.
But a lot of people want something they're going to be able to handle. And
Well, and think about it again.
cool.
I'll just talk about this neighborhood, Oscar. If I'm deploying with a police dog and I'm going to search 30 homes, how many times is the dog going to hear, "Phooey, here, sit, off"?
Yeah.
You know, probably 200-300 times in that search. Maybe
Right.
get corrected electronically. It depends on the animal
Right.
and the circumstances. Are we going to have a dog that shuts down because of that?
Right.
We can't afford that. We need that dog to want to keep going. You take many sport dogs, come out here and you start to handle them in that same way, and you'll watch
shut
them.
down. Yeah.
They just break down. They become confused and they're reliant upon the handler, and we
Yeah.
can't have that.
I think it's depending on the sport dog. Like, there's some really good sport dogs that I think would do really
Crossover.
well on the street, crossover.
Yeah.
But then there's some that won't, I think there's from the other side as well.
Yeah.
That can cross over really nice. But
Yeah, I would say during procurement, we're looking for, and you know, all the rumors about these super tough man-eaters from Holland. I don't think there's any truth to that. Do I think that program produces the best candidate for us as law enforcement or the military? I do. I do think that the KNPV Malinois is a certain type of animal.
Do you think that it's like the culture because the culture in, like, say right now where we are today, I feel like there's so many new ways of training that maybe they don't add the same amount of pressure to these dogs.
Yeah.
So what ends up happening is you don't know how, you know, I feel like, I don't know because I'm not super involved with KNPV or at all, but I feel like they're still a little more old school. So meaning that if they still train a certain way, there's a certain dog that's going to be able to go through that program because they took a certain type of pressure that maybe other dogs aren't taking.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way of explaining it, Oscar. I think that there is a certain amount of pressure that they put on these dogs from a young age. I mean, you watch them, they teach the bark at the box. You know,
Right.
a 12-week-old Malinois puppy that is being agitated civilly, and he is barking like what we would hope to find in Blind 6 at the Nationals. I mean, you're looking at a 12-week-old puppy barking like that. I think to produce a dog like that, they got to breed for certain characteristics. And I think those characteristics just lend themselves to what we require of a police dog here. Do other do other dog sports produce good police dogs? Yes, they do. But by and large, I would say the KNPV, hands down, there's not another program that can compete with it in terms of numbers and your chance of success.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can see that.
Yeah, definitely.
I would like to learn a little bit more about KNPV. I have never, you know, outside of what I see on YouTube, I haven't really dove into it. But cool, man. Outside of everything we've talked about right now, where do you see, you know, canine law enforcement going in the future?
So I think it's at a crossroads, and really law enforcement is. You know, we've had some unfortunate times the past 5 or 6 years, really since about 2015 to now. You know, the way society views law enforcement, it's had its ups and downs. I think right now we're starting to see society take a more favorable view of law enforcement because, you know, crime is at an all-time high.
Especially here in California.
Take the politics out of it. I mean, look, I just saw your post the other day about your dog training field got vandalized.
Yep.
I mean, look how much that set you back. I mean, I think the public is starting to realize that, you know, cops aren't bad people. They're out there to do a good job. But law enforcement recruits from the human race. Not everyone is going to be stellar.
Right.
With regards to canine specifically, I don't know of any technology that can replace a dog. I know
you see the robot dogs?
I see the robot dogs. I see that. But, you know, those things are reliant upon a human handler, technology to supply it with energy, and all these other things. And we've been using robots in those applications for years. I don't know if you're aware of that.
Not like that.
Now, they haven't been a robot dog, and those get all the press right now because they're cool to look at and they get headlines, right? Viewership on TV. But we've been using robots for decades. It's nothing new to us. They have tried to replace the working police dog time and time again. There is no amount of technology that can do it.
No, the nose, man, come on.
The nose, I've seen my police dogs find people 50, 60 yards away. Watched them alert. And when I'm watching them alert, what does that give me the opportunity to do? Get together a plan and keep everybody safe.
Right.
That robot dog can't do that.
Right.
It just cannot do it. Yeah, I think you're going to start to see the police canine community really start to professionalize. It's been professional, but you know, vendors, they're large.
Right.
Man.
I was talking to Danny, and he was saying, like, you don't really have to be certified to run a police dog school. You could just bring in the person that's going to certify and.
Yeah. So, you know, it's not a highly regulated industry. I think what keeps it regulated are the agencies who are buying dogs, because they're only going to buy them from honest, good-hearted people.
Right.
So it's kind of self-regulated in that respect, but it's true, like anyone. I mean, you could teach a dog to bite. I've watched you work. You're a phenomenal dog trainer. No doubt you could go out and open up, you know, elevated police, whatever it is, right? But there's no one to stop you from doing that.
Right.
I think the people that do that, I think, and the ones who aren't qualified and don't have all the other attributes that I've discussed,
right,
they eventually get found out. They're here today, gone tomorrow.
Right.
You see the ones that last a long time. They've been here for decades. They continue to support law enforcement, and they continue to supply good. When I talk about a dog being a good dog, I call it an honest dog.
Right.
Just like an honest human. Honest Malinois, he's going to give you all he's got.
And he'll let you know what he's thinking. Like, I mean.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, if it's a little too much pressure, you're probably going to taste these canines, buddy.
Yeah.
I think that self-regulates the police dog, the canine industry.
Right.
You know, so.
Cool, man.
Yeah.
Hey, I appreciate you, you know, this talk. I think a lot of people are going to get a lot out of this, especially people that want to, because we hear it all the time. I want to get into police dogs and this and that. And I think that it's a lot harder than what people think, and especially if you want to do it the right way.
Yeah.
And for me, I want to get into this, not for money reasons, more so because I really enjoy working dogs.
Yeah.
And like I told you before, I wanted to be a sheriff. I never got to be a sheriff, but you know, now I could somehow try to be involved with this if I ever get into it, you know?
Yeah.
But that's why I reached out to you, Danny, and people like that could kind of guide me a little bit.
Yeah, and I say just continue to reach out to the right folks. Guys like Danny, you can't go wrong. Well respected, been there, done that. That's the other thing is, you know, if you're someone looking to bridge into the police K9 community, whether it be just to help out or even if it is for monetary reasons, there's a business interest in it. I mean, everyone's got to feed a family. There's no doubt. You got to make money. So everyone understands that. But I would say for whatever your reason is, reach out to the people that are real.
Right.
The guys who have been there, done that, the real deal. And I forgive my terminology here. I hope you don't get angry at me, but you know, the hang around at a K9 unit. Hey man, I'm a decoy.
Yeah.
I know someone that works at a K9 unit. I'm going to go out there and show them these flashy inside bicep moves and you know, all this. And now you're labeling yourself as a K9 trainer.
Right.
You're not.
Right.
You're a good decoy. And thank God that, you know, we're grateful for the sweat you put in that suit. But you're not a police dog trainer.
Right.
There's a distinct difference.
I agree.
I would say, if I were to give you any personal advice, stay away from that route.
Right.
I've seen it even in the military dog community. Some young guys in his 20s or 30s, he's willing to take chances in a bite suit, do very dynamic videos. The K9 guys love them because a lot of K9 handlers aren't good dog trainers. There's a difference between a good dog trainer and a good dog handler. They might be great dog handlers, but not good dog trainers. And so now they have a kinship to this guy who's willing to do all these things in the suit. Next thing you know, they're on social media. I think that's probably one of the quickest way to get outed in the community. I would say do it the way these guys that have been there before me have done it, before you have done it. You call it old school, whatever you want.
No, I think you need it, man.
I think it's the right school.
It's needed.
And that's just my belief.
Yeah, and I think it's the same for sport. Like, I mean, I'll have somebody come and be like, hey, if somebody came and said, hey, can you get me to the IGP World Championships? I'm going to say, I've never been there myself.
Right.
We could do our best and try to get there, but I'm not going to tell you I'm going to get you there.
How about a local trial first?
Yeah, let's get you to the local club, you know,
Yeah.
and do something. And I think that people need to be honest about that.
Yeah.
You know, if somebody came and said, hey, can you get me to PSA 3? I'll say, I haven't been there. I can see what the exercises look like. I can help, but if we are going to get you there, you would probably have to bring somebody in that has been there that can also help us get there.
And I would add this thing too. If you're gonna be around police officers, K9 handlers, and you're gonna offer a product or a service, make sure it's worthwhile. Make sure it's something that applies to them. Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'll tell you this much. I'll give you this example. If you're a police dog handler that is constantly worried about your dog's grip, its gripping as full as possible, and you're putting 4 hours of training a week into your dog's grip, you've bought the wrong dog.
Right.
Bite work is probably it is an important aspect of it, but I see people on social media all the time. They're professing to be police dog trainers. And how important is it for your dog to grip full?
Right.
There's some importance to it. But to a real K9 handler who's out in the field as a police officer, doing all the things that he's required to do, this is probably going to be the least of your concerns. If this is your major concern, you've bought the wrong dog.
Right.
But so many police dog guys or people that are trying to cross over into the industry put so much emphasis on this and not all the other aspects that go into the dog.
Right.
But that's a sign of a novice. And I see it all the time. I see it on social media quite a bit. You know, I'm gonna make the dog bark at a prone suspect. And now I'm gonna reward him with this tug. Well, it looks important to the novice K9 handler, and it may have some worth to him. You may make him feel better, but to the experienced eye, there's not much worth there. We're not going to dedicate 5 hours a week to that. There's too many other things as an officer, as a peace officer, that I got to do. So I would say, if you're going to go to these conferences, you're going to do presentations, you're going to come out to a dog training field, make sure what you have to offer is worthwhile and can impact the team.
I'll make sure I run it by you.
Yeah, run it by Dan.
But this is honestly, for me, this is the reason why I wanted to hang out with you and talk to you, because I need to hear this. Because so again, in my thoughts, I'm thinking a certain thing like, oh, this is what I see some of these people struggling with, but I've never been in that job, so I can only speak from out here, and I can't really say 100%. Hey, this is the issue you're having because of this, and this, because I'm not there.
Yeah.
I don't know what their training looks like.
Yeah,
know?
it's different.
So to me, I really appreciate you, you know, being honest and.
Pleasure. I appreciate you having me out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Oscar.
All
Pleasure
right.
to be here.
Guys, make sure you guys subscribe. I would say follow Romeo, but he's not really into any of the social media stuff. But anyways, he's one of the top guys out here for sure, and I look forward to keep learning from you, man.
Yeah,
so
pleasure.
thank you guys. See you guys on the next one.
Let's get it. This that go and get it. With no hesitation. This that never quit. Start that elevation. This that process.